Episode 18, The End of the Commotion. Well, now, it's obvious, but punching a minister is a really bad idea. It's just so obvious. Bro, what are you doing? The words belonged to Kaijin, who had arrived with a contingent of guards. I hadn't seen him all day, a rare occurrence, as he isn't one to slack off daily. I'd invited him for a drink, but he turned me down, saying he had an errand. So it's only natural that he'd be stunned to find me causing a ruckus while he was away on his business. I could just escape, but that would be a bad move. Humph, that idiot over there was rude to my guest and benefactor Rimuru Dono, so I just gave him a little lesson. That's all. I pointed to Minister Bester, who was being tended to by the 4 knights he'd brought with him. Bester was still in a state of shock, his nose dripping blood as he stared at me with a dazed expression. He probably never imagined he'd be punched. He was so surprised he didn't even seem to feel the pain. Hey, a little lesson? You can't do that to a minister. That's a really bad idea, Kaijin muttered with a sigh. In any case, I'll have to take you and the others into custody. With that, Kaijin gave instructions to his subordinates. But then he whispered so only we could hear, I won't let anything bad happen to you. Just go along with it. Of course, I had no intention of causing a fuss. I stealthily moved over to the proprietress and slipped her 5 gold coins. She looked at me surprised. That includes a bit extra for the trouble. I'll come again. I said my goodbyes. This was a quality place, and it would be a shame to be banned because of this. And so we were taken away. But I've forgotten something. That's right, Gapta. I hadn't brought that idiot to the tavern. For his repeated foolishness, I was in the middle of executing the hell of the basket worm punishment. At first, I thought of hanging him upside down, but that seemed a bit too much. So I wrapped him up tightly with sticky thread and hung him from the ceiling in the room. Hey, this is too cruel. I want to go with you too. He'd wailed in a pitiful voice, but if I gave in, he'd only take advantage of me later. So I told him, you fool, your daily behavior is just too much. If you're so upset, why don't you summon your partner, Stormfang, Wolf, and get yourself out of there? And left him with a task he couldn't possibly do. A goblin would be in trouble, but a hobgoblin like him could probably go without food or water for about a week. If we were going to be detained for a long time, I'd just break out and rescue him. I decided to just forget about him for now. I felt a little bad for him, but he's a tough guy, so he'll be fine. Waiting trial. Our 5 were taken to the palace. We weren't restrained in any ominous way. It was more like a voluntary escort, though it was a forced one. In the end, we spent 2 days in a cell. However, the food was quite good and the room was well furnished. Since we were 5, it felt more like a large room than a prison cell. The treatment seemed decent. It's my fault for losing my temper. I'm sorry. Kaijin apologized, but no one there was bothered by it. Kaijin-san, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, there's no need for you to be so down, old man. And the 3 brothers felt the same way. More importantly, once we're released, we'll follow you, Kaijin-san. Rimuru Dono, will it be a bother if we tag along? And I couldn't quite grasp what the last one meant, but I understood their sentiment. Humph, I'll take care of all of you, but be prepared because I'll work you to the bone. Right. And so we began discussing our plans after our release. The first day passed like that, and on the evening of the second day, I casually asked, come to think of it, that minister really had it out for you. Is there a reason for that? At my question, Kaijin made a face like he had bitten into a bitter bug, sighed, and began to speak. It turned out that Kaijin used to be one of the commanders of the Royal Knights. The Royal Knights had 7 divisions, and he had been in charge of one of them. The 3 support divisions, the Engineer Corps, the Supply Corps, and the Medical Corps. The 3 elite combat divisions, the Heavy Assault Corps, the Magic Assault Corps, and the Magic Support Corps. and the most important of all, the Royal Guard Corps, who served the king directly. Kaijin had been the commander of the Engineer Corps. His second in command at the time was Bester. He's from a Marcus family, and it was said he bought his position with money. Since I was a commoner, he was envious. It must have been complicated for him. It might have felt humiliating to take orders from a commoner. I didn't have the luxury of worrying about other people's feelings. I was just desperate to meet the king's expectations. That's when that incident happened. Then he told us about the incident that led him to leaving the military.
The magic armor soldier incident. At the time, the Dwarf Engineering Corps was at the bottom of the 7 divisions in terms of evaluation, with no new technological innovations. The Bester faction argued that the Engineering Corps should be the flagship division, given their nation's reputation for technology. The Kaijin faction insisted on a more conservative approach, steadily advancing their research. The debate was at a stalemate, and they couldn't reach a conclusion in their meetings. In the midst of this, a joint project with an elven engineer was launched, the Magic Armor Soldier Project. Bester was desperate to make this project a success and solidify the Engineering Corps' status. Kaijin warned him about his impatience, but the commoner's advice fell on deaf ears. As a result, Bester's reckless actions caused the elemental magic core to go haywire, and the project was a failure. The Magic Armor Soldier Project, which had brought together the greatest engineers of the time, ended that day. In the end, Kaijin took responsibility for the failure and left the military. Bester had blamed everything on Kaijin, bribed the military brass, and even fabricated false testimony. Bester was a textbook villain, easy to understand, in a way. So the reason he was so hostile was that he was afraid Kaijin might return to the military and threaten his position. A coward like that, maybe he should just be executed. Well, maybe execution is too much to ask for. Well, that's the story. If I leave this country, maybe he'll calm down a bit. With those words, he concluded his tale. The 3 brothers, who also knew the truth of the incident, had come to dislike Minister Bester. After hearing that, I hated him too. However, he had punched a noble. I didn't think we'd be released without a hitch. I voiced my concern. I think we'll be all right. Even though I retired, I was a commander, so I was given the status of a baronet. If it were a commoner against a noble, we might have been executed without a trial. He said this and laughed heartily. I, however, wasn't laughing at all. If things got bad, I'd just escape. I'd pretend I wasn't involved and live as an ordinary slime until the heat died down. I thought this to myself. The trial. The day of the trial arrived and we were escorted before the king. The Magic Armor Soldier Incident. At the time, the Dwarf Engineering Corps was at the bottom of the 7 divisions in terms of evaluation, with no new technological innovations. The Bester faction argued that the Engineering Corps should be the flagship division, given their nation's reputation for technology. The Kaijin faction insisted on a more conservative approach, steadily advancing their research. The debate was at a stalemate and they couldn't reach a conclusion in their meetings. In the midst of this, a joint project with an elven engineer was launched, the Magic Armor Soldier Project. Bester was desperate to make this project a success and solidify the Engineering Corps' status. Kaijin warned him about his impatience, but the commoner's advice fell on deaf ears. As a result, Bester's reckless actions caused the elemental magic core to go haywire, and the project was a failure. The Magic Armor Soldier Project, which had brought together the greatest engineers of the time, ended that day. In the end, Kaijin took responsibility for the failure and left the military. Bester had blamed everything on Kaijin, bribed the military brass, and even fabricated false testimony. Bester was a textbook villain, easy to understand, in a way. So the reason he was so hostile was that he was afraid Kaijin might return to the military and threaten his position. A coward like that, maybe he should just be executed. Well, maybe execution is too much to ask for. The trial. The day of the trial arrived and we were escorted before the king, the hero king of the dwarves. His presence was overwhelming. The current king, Gazelle Dwago was sitting deep in his chair with his eyes closed. He had a sturdy physique typical of dwarves and a muscular frame that seemed to contain a burst of energy. His distinctive dark skin and slicked back black hair stood out. He's strong. My instincts, for the first time in a while, were sounding a full-blown alarm. Knights stood on either side of him. They felt strong too, but they paled in comparison to the king. This king was a monster. I thought I could easily escape, but this was different. My relaxed mind instantly became alert in the presence of the king. This might be the first time I felt a genuine sense of crisis since coming to this world. A man knelt before the king and said something to him. With the king's permission, he stood up and announced, "The trial will now begin. Everyone, be silent." Over the course of an hour, both sides presented their arguments. We, the accused, were not allowed to speak here. Only nobles of count rank or higher were permitted to speak freely. Anyone else had to wait for the king's permission. What would happen if you spoke without permission? The moment you did, your guilt would be confirmed. What's more, a charge of lèse-majesty would be added. It didn't matter if you were innocent or not. That was the rule here. We had no choice but to rely on our representatives. We had met with them several times over the past 2 days to prepare. They were like lawyers. I wondered if our representative was trustworthy. My anxiety, as it turned out, was well-founded. And so, as you have heard, these individuals broke into the establishment and assaulted Minister Bester, who was simply enjoying a quiet drink. This is an act that should not be tolerated. Is that the truth? Yes, I have not only interviewed Kaijin Dono, but also obtained testimony from the establishment itself. There was no doubt that the previous statement was accurate. Wait, what? Our representative, who we thought was on our side, had betrayed us. This doesn't look good. I looked at Kaijin, his face first turning red, then pale. Of course he was shocked. We weren't even allowed to make a counter-argument. By the way, a representative is not allowed to lie. If they are caught, the punishment is death. Unless they had a very good reason or were prepared to die, lying was unthinkable. The system was designed to prevent lower-ranking individuals, in this case criminals, from speaking in front of the king. But this time it was being used in the worst possible way. Your Majesty, have you heard enough? Please hand down a severe punishment for these men.
Bester, full of himself, spoke to the king. He glanced at us, a triumphant smile on his face. That bastard. I really should have hit him harder. The king remained still with his eyes closed. A chamberlain, seeing this, spoke on behalf of the king. Silence. I will now hand down the verdict. The principal offender, Kajin, will be sentenced to 20 years of forced labor in the mines. The accomplices will be sentenced to 10 years of forced labor in the mines. This trial is now adjourned. Wait. A deep, quiet voice interrupted the closing statement. The king opened his eyes and looked at Kajin. It's been a long time, Kajin. Are you well? Yes, Your Majesty. I am well, and it is a pleasure to see that you are also in good health. After a moment's pause, Kajin replied. It seemed it was okay to answer the king's questions. Good. We are old friends. Let's get to the point. Are you willing to come back? A stir went through the crowd. Bester's face went white. I noticed the treacherous representative had a deathly pale face. With all due respect, Your Majesty, I have already found a master. This bond is my treasure. I have no intention of letting go of this treasure, not even at your command. These words caused a stir among the onlookers. The guards directed their killing intent toward Kajin, but Kajin showed no fear. He stood tall and looked the king directly in the eye. The king looked at him and then closed his eyes again. Is that so? He muttered. Silence fell over the room once more, and then, I will now pass judgment. Listen carefully. Kujin and his companions are to be exiled from the kingdom. After midnight tonight, I will not permit you to remain in this country. That is all. Now, get out of my sight." The king opened his eyes wide and spoke in a booming voice. This was the aura of a true king, a presence so overwhelming it made my body tremble. And yet, the king looked sad to me. Exile. And so the trial was adjourned and we returned to Kajin's shop. What had supposed to be a simple trip for a drink had turned into a huge mess. We had to pack up and leave quickly. Come to think of it, was Gopta okay? It had only been 3 days. A little worried, I opened the door to the punishment room and... "Ah, you're back. Did you have fun? Next time, I want to go with you." Gopta leapt off the sofa looking perfectly fine. What? How did he get out of the spider's sticky thread? I looked closer and saw that he was using a storm-fang wolf as a pillow. No way! Did he actually succeed in summoning the wolf? Oh, yeah, I just wished for it to come, and it did. He said it so casually. No other hobgoblin has ever succeeded in doing that. Could it be that all the nutrition from his brain went to his talent instead? No, that can't be it. Not for a Gopta. It must have been a fluke. I then noticed the dwarves staring at the storm-fang wolf frozen in place. "What are you guys doing? Let's get ready and go." I called out to the dwarves. "Hey, wait. Why is there a black-fang wolf here?" "That's right. We have to get away. That's a B-rank monster." They were in a panic. It was so comical and funny to watch. It's fine. Don't worry, it's not much different from a normal dog. It's just a wolf I keep as a pet." I meant to reassure them, but all 4 of them went speechless. There was no time to waste. I had the dwarves change into their traveling clothes and we all went outside. I went inside alone and used my predator skill to swallow everything we needed to bring. I still had plenty of space, but swallowing the building would draw too much attention and make people suspicious, so I decided against it. With our travel preparations complete, we headed toward the forest entrance, our meeting point, with Riguru and the others. The armed nation of Dwargon, a nation we would have many more encounters with in the future. We who had fled this country had no idea of this yet. Status. Name: Rumaru Tempest. Race: Slime. Divine Protection. Crest of Storms. Title: Ruler of Monsters. Magic: None. Skills: Unique Skill. Great Sage. Unique Skill: Predator. Slime Intrinsic Skill: Dissolve, Absorb, Self-Regeneration. Extra Skill: Water Manipulation. Extra Skill: Magic Perception. Acquired Skills: Black Serpent, Heat Source Perception, Poison Breath. Centipede, Paralysis Breath. Spider, Sticky Thread, Steel Thread. Bat, Ultrasonic Waves. Lizard, Body Armor. Black Wolf, Super Sense of Smell. Thought Communication. Menace, Shadow Step, Black Lightning. Resistances: Temperature Fluctuation, XX. Physical Attack Resistance. Pain Nullification. Electric Current Resistance. Paralysis Resistance. The chamber was silent. It was hard to believe the noisy argument from moments ago had ever happened. After the 5 criminals fled, no one moved. Breaking the silence, the king spoke. "Now, Thuster, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Your Majesty,
This is a misunderstanding. There must be some mistake." Minister Bester cried out in a pathetic display, clinging to the king. The king, in contrast, remained cold and emotionless. "A misunderstanding, you say? I have lost a loyal subject." "What are you talking about? That man would never swear loyalty to you, and he's just some low-born—" "Bester, you are mistaken. Kaijin had already left my side. The loyal subject I have lost is you." His voice was calm and devoid of emotion. Bester's throat tightened. He had to say something. His heart raced and his mind went blank. He couldn't think. What did the king just say? "The one I have lost is you?" What does that mean? Bester tried to think of what to do, but his mind was empty. "I will ask you again. Bester, is there anything you wish to say?" He was terrified. Fear consumed Bester. The king was asking a question. He had to answer, but no words came to him. With all due respect, I had my hopes up for you. I waited. Even during the magic armor soldier incident, I waited for you to tell me the truth. And now, this time, look." With that, the king pointed to 2 items. His attendants had brought them over at some point. Bester looked at them with a blank stare. One was a globular bag filled with an unknown liquid. The other was a long sword. "Do you know what these are?" When the king asked, he looked closely. He didn't recognize the sphere, but the longsword looked familiar. It was the one Kaijin had brought. "Explain it." At the king's command, an attendant explained. It took Bester a moment to comprehend. The liquid was a perfect recovery potion, a full extraction of the hippocute herb. Even with the pinnacle of dwarf technology, they could only achieve 98% extraction, which only resulted in an upper-grade potion. This was 99%. Bester's face twisted in surprise. He needed to know how was it extracted. Then even more shocking information was explained to Bester. The longsword's magical steel core had already begun to assimilate. That was impossible. Normally, it would take at least 10 years for assimilation to begin gradually. Bester's mind reactivated in a state of shock. If this was true, a thought took over Bester's mind. That slime brought those to us. Your actions have severed our ties with that monster. Do you have anything to say? Bester finally understood the depth of the king's anger. There was nothing left to say. "I have nothing to say, Your Majesty." Tears welled up in his eyes. He had been abandoned by the king. He finally understood. He had only wanted to be useful to the king and to be recognized by him. That was all he wanted. When did he go wrong? Was it when he became jealous of Kaijin, or even earlier? He didn't know. All he knew was the fact that he had betrayed the king's expectations. "I see. Then, Bester, I forbid you from entering the palace. Do not let me see your face again. But I will offer you one last word. Well done." When Bester exited, the royal guards rushed in and apprehended the treacherous representative. The king watched them, then said, "Shadows, monitor that slime's movements. Do not be detected. Do you hear me?" The king emphasized his command. His usually taciturn nature made this order even more significant. "With our lives," the shadows said and disappeared.
The king thought to himself, "Who is that monster slime? It is a kind of monster. A monster like that is now free. Perhaps this peaceful era is coming to an end."